Hello everyone, welcome back to Bang Official. If you love mysterious stories, horror legends, and dark secrets hidden in forgotten places, then this channel is for you. Every episode, we bring you a new story filled with suspense, mystery, and unexpected twists that will keep you listening until the very end. So before we begin, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Bang Official, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now turn off the lights, relax, and let's begin tonight's mysterious story. Today's story, SUMAR White Night story, is called The Mysterious Village Where People Disappear Every Night. A young journalist named Daniel Carter travels to a forgotten village deep in the forest called Black Hollow. For the past 3 months, more than 30 people have mysteriously disappeared there. No bodies, no witnesses, no explanations. The villagers are terrified, but no one is willing to talk about what is really happening. However, Daniel soon discovers a terrifying secret. Every night at midnight, something comes out of the forest, something silent, something that is not human, and once it sees you, it will never forget your face. Tonight, Daniel may uncover the truth behind the disappearances, but the real question is, will he survive long enough to tell the story? Now, let the story begin. Story: Tidalitha, mysterious village where people disappear every night. CHPTR 1. The stranger arrives at Black Hollow. The rain started before sunset by the time Daniel Carter left the highway. The storm had become violent. Lightning flashed across the sky, and the forest road ahead looked like it had not been used in years. Mud covered the narrow path. Tree branches scratched the sides of his car as he drove slowly forward. Daniel sighed. This better be worth it. He was a journalist working for a small newspaper. Most of his stories were painfully boring. City council meetings, parking violations, local arguments about taxes. But 3 days ago, his editor handed him something strange. A story about a forgotten village, a place where people were disappearing. The village was called Black Hollow, according to official police records. More than 30 people had vanished in the last 3 months. No bodies were found. No suspects were identified. No witnesses existed. The cases were quietly closed, but online rumors told a very different story. People claimed something horrifying lived near the village. They said every night someone disappeared. Thunder roared as Daniel drove deeper into the forest. The GPS on his dashboard suddenly lost signal. No service. Of course, places like this were completely cut off from the outside world. Daniel looked at the paper map his editor printed earlier. According to the map, the village should be nearby. Very close. Then suddenly his headlights illuminated something ahead. A wooden sign. Daniel slowed the car and stepped out. Rain dripped from the edges of the sign. The paint had almost faded away, but the letters were still readable. Black HOL load population 117. Daniel frowned. That's strange. The last government census showed over 300 residents living here. Where did the rest go? The wind pushed through the trees and their branches creaked like old bones. For a moment Daniel felt uncomfortable, like the forest itself was watching him. He shook his head. Just your imagination. But deep down, he wasn't so sure. When Daniel finally reached the village, something immediately felt wrong. Old wooden houses stood quietly along the road. Many of them looked abandoned, paint peeling, windows cracked, fences broken, dim yellow lights flickered weakly on a few porches. But what surprised Daniel most was the people. They were all outside, standing silently, watching the road, watching him. Daniel slowed the car. None of them waved, none of them greeted him. They simply stared. Their faces looked pale, exhausted, afraid. Daniel rolled down the window. An old man slowly stepped forward. His gray hair moved gently in the wind. His eyes looked like someone who had not slept in many days. "Evening," Daniel said politely. "I'm looking for Black Hollow." The old man stared at him for a moment. "You found it." Daniel showed his press badge. "My name is Daniel Carter. I'm a journalist. I came here to investigate the disappearances." Immediately, the villagers began whispering nervously. Some looked frightened, others looked angry. A woman quickly grabbed her child and pulled him inside the house. Doors started closing, windows shutting. Daniel frowned. "Did I say something wrong?" The old man sighed. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel had heard that sentence many times before. Usually it meant he was very close to the truth. "Why not?" Daniel asked. The old man slowly looked toward the forest. Tall black trees surrounded the village like a wall. Their shadows stretched across the ground like dark fingers. Then the old man spoke quietly. "You came because people disappeared." "Yes." The old man shook his head slowly. "They didn't disappear." Daniel leaned forward. "What do you mean?" The old man whispered something that made Daniel uneasy. "They were taken." Before Daniel could ask another question, something strange happened. The wind suddenly stopped, the rain slowed, and the entire village became silent. Every villager looked up at the dark sky. Fear filled their eyes. Then someone suddenly shouted, "It's almost time." Another villager screamed. Everyone inside. Panic exploded through the village. People rushed toward their houses. Doors slammed, lights turned off, curtains closed. Within seconds, the entire village became dark, completely silent. Daniel stepped out of his car. What just happened? No one answered. The old man was the last person still outside. He stood in the doorway of his house, his face filled with fear. "Get inside," he said quietly now. Daniel looked at his watch. 11:57 p.m. "Why?" The old man didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, "They come at midnight." Then he shut the door. Now Daniel stood alone in the empty road. The forest surrounded him from every direction. The sky grew darker. Even the moon disappeared behind thick clouds. Daniel suddenly realized something terrifying. The forest had become completely silent. No insects, no birds, no wind, nothing. Just deep, unnatural silence. Then he heard it. Footsteps, heavy, slow, crunch, crunch, crunch. Something was walking in the forest, and it was getting closer. Daniel grabbed his flashlight from the car. His heart started beating faster. Probably just an animal, he whispered, but deep down, he knew that wasn't true. The footsteps suddenly stopped, somewhere between the trees. Just beyond the road, Daniel slowly raised the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness. At first he saw nothing, then something moved. A tall shadow stepped forward. Daniel froze. The figure was huge, at least 7 feet tall. Its body looked extremely thin. Its arms were too long, almost reaching its knees. Its skin was gray. like stone. Daniel whispered softly, "What are you?" The creature slowly lifted its head. The flashlight illuminated its face, or what should have been a face. Daniel's blood turned cold. There were no eyes, no nose, no mouth, only smooth, gray skin, like a blank mask. Daniel stepped backward in terror. The creature tilted its head as if studying him. Then it slowly took one step forward. The ground cracked under its weight. Daniel dropped the flashlight. The light rolled across the road. For a moment, everything went dark. When the flashlight stopped moving, the beam pointed back toward the forest, but the creature was gone, completely gone, as if it had never existed. Daniel looked around in shock. "Hello?" No answer, only silence. Then a voice spoke behind him. "You saw it." Daniel turned quickly. The old man stood in the doorway again, his face pale. "You saw one of them." Daniel nodded slowly. "What was that thing?" The old man whispered quietly. "We don't know." Daniel swallowed. "But people disappear because of that." The old man nodded, double quotes every night. Daniel tried to calm himself. "That's impossible." The old man looked at him with deep sadness. "You came here searching for the truth." Daniel nodded. Double quotes, yes. The old man slowly closed his eyes. Then he said something that made Daniel's heart stop. "Then I'm sorry, because once they see you, they always come back." Daniel felt a cold chill crawl down his spine. "What do you mean?" The old man slowly shut the door. His final words echoed through the dark village. They never forget a new face. Deep in the forest, something moved again, watching the village, waiting, because midnight had only just begun. Story. Taito Lee. The mysterious village where people disappear every night. CHAP. To the night, someone was taken. Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the empty road. The old man's final words echoed in his mind. They never forget a new face. The door slowly closed behind the old man. Now the village was completely silent. Again, every house was dark. Every window was shut. Daniel looked down at his watch. 11:59 p.m. Only 1 minute until midnight. The air suddenly felt colder. The forest surrounding the village looked darker than before. Even the moonlight could not reach the ground. Between the trees, Daniel gripped his flashlight tightly. His instincts told him to go back to the car, to leave this place immediately. But the journalist inside him refused. If people were truly disappearing every night, he had to see it with his own eyes. The clock on his watch changed. 12 o'clock a.m. midnight. For a moment, nothing happened. The village remained quiet. Daniel almost laughed at himself. Maybe the villagers were just scared of some wild animals. Maybe the entire story was exaggerated. That suddenly a deep sound came from the forest. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Daniel turned his flashlight toward the trees. The same footsteps he had heard earlier. Heavy, slow, but this time there were more. Crunch, crunch. Multiple footsteps moving between the trees. Daniel felt his heartbeat quicken. Something was definitely out there, and it was moving toward the village. Then he saw movement. A tall gray figure stepped out from the darkness between the trees. Neil held his breath. It was the same creature he had seen before. Tall, thin, gray skin, and a face with no eyes, no expression. But this time, it wasn't alone. Another figure appeared behind it. Then another. 3 of them now stood at the edge of the forest, watching the houses. Daniel whispered to himself, "Oh my God." The creatures moved slowly, their long arms hanging beside their bodies. They walked like hunters, searching for prey. Daniel quickly stepped behind a broken fence. He lowered his body so the creatures wouldn't see him. His heart was pounding loudly in his chest. The creatures stopped near the road. They tilted their heads slightly, as if listening, as if searching. Then suddenly one of them turned toward a small house. At the end of the street, the door of the house creaked open. A young woman stepped outside. She looked terrified. Her hands were shaking. She whispered toward the forest, "Please, not tonight." Daniel immediately realized who she was. Clara, the woman the old man mentioned earlier. Clara slowly stepped backward toward her door, but it was too late. One of the creatures suddenly moved. Its speed was unbelievable. 1 second, it was standing near the trees. The next second, it was already halfway across the road. Daniel gasped silently. The creature stopped directly in front of Clara. She froze, her body trembling. "Please," she cried softly. The creature slowly raised one long arm. Its gray fingers stretched toward her face. Clara screamed. The creature grabbed her. Instantly, Daniel felt his entire body freeze. The creature lifted Clara off the ground like she weighed nothing. She struggled wildly. "Help me." Her scream echoed across the village. Lights flickered inside several houses, but no one came out. No one opened their doors. Everyone stayed hidden. The other creatures watched silently. Clara kicked and screamed, but the creature held her tightly. Then it turned around and began walking back toward the forest. Daniel couldn't move. His legs felt like stone. He was witnessing something impossible, something no one would believe. Clara's screams became weaker as the creature carried her toward the trees. "Please." Then, suddenly, she was gone. The creatures disappeared into the forest, and the silence returned. Daniel slowly stood up. His hands were shaking. He had just watched a person disappear right in front of him. The forest became quiet again, as if nothing had happened. Then a door slowly opened behind him. Daniel turned around. The old man stepped outside again. His face looked empty. "You see now," he said quietly. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." The old man walked closer. "We tried to stop it many times. Nothing works. Daniel took a deep breath. What are those things? The old man looked toward the forest again. We don't know what they are, but we know where they came from. Daniel looked at him. Where? The old man hesitated. Then he spoke slowly. 50 years ago. The village opened something that should have remained buried. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? The old man sighed deeply. There is a cave in the forest. Long ago, miners discovered it. At the bottom of the cave, they found a strange stone statue. Daniel felt a cold chill. A statue, yes. It looked like a tall human figure, but its face. The old man paused, had no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Daniel's blood ran cold, just like the creature. What happened to the statue? Daniel asked. The old man's voice became very quiet. The villagers brought it back here. And that night, the first person disappeared. The old man looked directly into Daniel's eyes, and it has never stopped since. Daniel turned toward the forest again. Somewhere deep inside the darkness, something had taken Clara Dot, and now he understood something terrifying. The disappearances were not random. The creatures were coming for a reason, and if the truth about the statue was real, then the curse of Black Hollow had only just begun. Story TLE, the mysterious village where people disappear every night. CHAPT 3. The secret buried in the forest. The night after Clara disappeared felt longer than any night Daniel had ever experienced. No one slept, not Daniel, not the villagers. When the first light of morning finally appeared behind the mountains, the village slowly came back to life. Doors opened carefully. People stepped outside in silence. Their faces looked empty. No one talked about Clara. No one mentioned the screams from the night before. It was as if everyone had already accepted what happened. Daniel stood near the road with his camera in his hand. He had recorded everything. The creatures, the moment Clara was taken, the terrifying silence afterward. But even while holding the proof in his hands, he knew something. No one outside this village would believe it. The old man Harold walked toward him slowly. You stayed outside all night, Harold said. Daniel nodded. I had to see the truth. Harold looked toward the forest again. The truth here is something people usually wish they never saw. Daniel turned to him. You said the curse started 50 years ago. Harold nodded quietly. Yes, then tell me everything. Harold hesitated. Then he motioned toward his house. Come inside. Inside the house, Harold pulled out an old wooden box. Dust covered the surface. It looked like it had not been opened for many years. Harold slowly lifted the lid. Inside were several old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a small leather journal. This belonged to my father, Harold said. He was one of the miners who discovered the cave. Daniel sat down quickly. Show me. Harold handed him the journal. The pages were yellow with age. The handwriting looked rushed and nervous. Daniel began reading. October 17, 1973. Today we discovered something strange in the northern forest. The mine tunnel opened into a natural cave, but the cave walls were covered with symbols. None of us recognized the language. We decided to explore deeper tomorrow. Daniel turned the page. October 19th, 1973. We found something at the bottom of the cave, a statue 7 feet tall, made of gray stone. It looks like a human figure, but it has no face. The others think it might be ancient, maybe worth money. Tomorrow, we bring it back to the village. Daniel looked up. This is when everything started. Harold nodded. Keep reading. Daniel turned the page again. The handwriting suddenly looked messy, almost panicked. October 21st, 1973, something is wrong. Ever since we moved the statue, strange things have been happening. Animals are disappearing. The forest feels different. Last night I heard footsteps outside my house. Heavy footsteps. But when I opened the door, no one was there. Daniel swallowed and turned another page. October 22nd, 1973. God help us, Thomas is gone. He disappeared last night. No one saw anything, but I swear I heard something walking near the forest. Something big, something not human. Daniel slowly closed the journal. That was the first disappearance. Harold nodded, and it never stopped after that. Daniel rubbed his temples. But why keep the statue here? Harold sighed deeply. We tried to destroy it, burn it, break it, throw it back into the cave. Nothing worked. Daniel frowned. So the creatures come from the cave. Harold nodded slowly. Yes. Daniel stood up immediately. Then we go to the cave. Harold looked shocked. No one goes there anymore. Anyone who enters the forest after sunset never returns. Daniel grabbed his camera and flashlight. Then we go during the day. Harold stared at him. You really want to stop this? Daniel looked toward the forest. Somewhere out there. Clara was gone, and dozens of others before her. Yes, he said quietly. I do. Harold remained silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. Fine, but if we go now. The two men walked toward the forest. The villagers watched them silently. No one tried to stop them, but fear filled every face. The path into the forest was narrow and dark, even in daylight. The trees blocked most of the sun. The deeper they walked, the colder the air became. After nearly 30 minutes, Harold suddenly stopped. There, he whispered. Daniel followed his gaze. Between the trees stood a large opening in the ground, the entrance to the cave. Dark, silent, waiting. Cold air slowly flowed out from the entrance. Daniel turned on his flashlight. You've been here before, he asked. Harold nodded. Double quotes once, and that was enough. Daniel stepped closer to the cave entrance. Something about the place felt wrong, like the ground itself was breathing. He pointed the flashlight inside. The beam of light revealed the cave walls. They were covered with symbols, hundreds of them, strange shapes carved deep into the stone. Daniel stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. Every sound echoed through the cave. Drip, drip, drip. Water slowly fell from the ceiling. Harold followed behind him nervously. Daniel, maybe we should leave. But Daniel kept walking. Deeper, deeper. Then suddenly the tunnel opened into a large chamber. Daniel stopped his flashlight, illuminated the center of the cave, and there it was, the statue, exactly as described in the journal. 7 feet tall, gray stone, a human-shaped figure, but its face was completely blank. Daniel slowly approached it. The surface of the stone looked smooth. as if something had touched it many times. Then Harold whispered something that made Daniel freeze. "Daniel, what?" Harold's voice trembled. It wasn't standing like that before. Daniel turned slowly. "What do you mean?" Harold pointed at the statue. "When I came here years ago, it was facing the wall." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Slowly, very slowly, he looked back at the statue. Now it was facing the cave entrance, facing them, and suddenly Daniel realized something horrifying. The statue wasn't the only thing inside the cave. Behind it, deep in the darkness, something moved. Story: to leave the mysterious village where people disappear every night. HIPTR. For the creatures in the dark, Daniel and Harold stood frozen inside the cave. Neither of them spoke, neither of them moved. The flashlight in Daniel's hand trembled slightly as the beam of light pointed deeper into the darkness behind the statue. For a moment, nothing happened. The cave was silent except for the sound of water dripping from the ceiling. Drip, drip, drip. Then suddenly a shadow shifted. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Harold nodded slowly. Yes, something was definitely moving in the darkness. Daniel slowly raised the flashlight higher. The light stretched deeper into the cave, and then he saw it, a tall figure standing motionless behind the statue. Gray skin, long arms, a blank face with no eyes. The same creature he saw in the village. Daniel stepped backward instinctively, but before he could say anything, another figure appeared beside the first one, then another. 4 of them now stood silently in the shadows, watching, waiting. Harold's voice shook. "There are more of them." Daniel slowly backed away from the statue. "We need to leave," he whispered, but the creatures had already started moving. One of them stepped forward. Its long legs moved slowly, but unnaturally smoothly. Another creature followed. Then the others thought their footsteps echoed through the cave. Crunch, 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 crunch. Daniel grabbed Harold's arm. "Run." They turned and rushed toward the cave entrance. Behind them, the creatures began moving faster. Their footsteps grew louder. Closer. Daniel could feel the cold air rushing past him as he ran. The narrow tunnel felt endless. The darkness seemed alive. Then suddenly Harold stumbled on a loose rock and fell hard onto the ground. "Harold!" Daniel shouted. He quickly pulled the old man back to his feet. But when Daniel turned around, one of the creatures was already halfway down the tunnel. It moved unbelievably fast. Its long arms stretched forward. Daniel grabbed Harold and pushed him ahead. "Go." They ran again. The cave entrance finally appeared ahead. Bright daylight poured through the opening. Just a few more steps. The creature behind them let out a strange sound. Not a roar, not a scream, but something like deep breathing. Heavy, hungry. Daniel felt its presence only a few feet behind him. He jumped forward and pulled Harold outside the cave. They both collapsed onto the ground just outside the entrance for several seconds. Neither of them moved. Daniel slowly turned back toward the cave. The tunnel was dark again, silent. No creatures came out. Harold looked terrified. "They never leave the cave during the day," he said. Daniel took a deep breath. "But they come to the village every night." Harold nodded. "Yes." Daniel looked back at the cave entrance. The statue, the symbols, the creatures hiding in the darkness. Everything was connected. Then something suddenly caught his attention. Near the cave entrance, half buried in dirt and fallen leaves, Daniel saw something metallic. He walked over and picked it up. It was an old miner's tool, a small explosive charge used for blasting rock. Daniel examined it carefully. The metal casing was rusted, but the fuse mechanism was still attached. A thought slowly formed in his mind. "What if we destroy the statue?" he said. Harold looked confused. "Destroy it?" Daniel held up the explosive. "If the statue started the curse, maybe destroying it will end everything." Harold stared at the cave entrance nervously. "And if it doesn't?" Daniel looked toward the dark forest. Somewhere out there, Clara had been taken, and many others before her. "If we do nothing," Daniel said quietly, "more people will disappear." Harold was silent for a long moment.
Then he nodded slowly. "All right." Daniel stood up. "We come back tonight." Harold looked shocked. "Tonight?" "Yes." Daniel tightened his grip on the explosive charge. "When the creatures leave the cave to hunt."
"That's when we destroy the statue." The wind moved through the trees. The forest suddenly felt darker, again as if something was listening, watching, waiting. Harold looked toward the village in the distance. "Then tonight," he said quietly, "we end the curse of Black Hollow." But deep inside the cave, something had already heard their plan. Story T. Lee, the mysterious village where people disappear every night. SHAPTR 5. The end of the curse and night. Returned to Black Hollow faster than Daniel expected. The sky turned dark long before the sun fully disappeared behind the mountains. Clouds covered the moon. The entire village once again fell into silence inside Harold's house. Daniel checked the small explosive device he had found near the cave. It was old, very old, but the fuse still worked. "If this goes wrong," Harold said nervously. Daniel finished attaching the fuse. "Then we run as fast as we can." Harold gave a weak smile. "You really believe destroying that statue will stop them?" Daniel thought for a moment. "I don't know, but I know that statue is the center of everything." Outside, the wind began to blow again. Branches scraped against the windows. Harold checked the clock on the wall. 11:45 p.m. "It's almost time," he whispered. Daniel grabbed his flashlight. "Then we should go now." The forest was darker than ever that night. The two men walked quietly along the narrow path. Neither of them spoke. Every sound in the forest made their hearts jump. After several minutes, they reached the cave entrance again. Cold air flowed out from the darkness inside. Daniel looked at Harold. "You ready?" Harold nodded slowly. "As ready as I'll ever be." They stepped inside. The cave was silent. Too silent. Daniel pointed his flashlight deeper into the tunnel. "No creatures, no movement," Harold whispered. "They must already be in the village." Daniel tightened his grip on the explosive. "Then we don't have much time." They moved deeper into the cave, past the narrow tunnel, into the large chamber, and there it stood again. The statue, tall, gray, faceless, waiting. Daniel carefully approached it. The symbols carved into the walls around the statue seemed darker than before, almost as if they were watching. Harold stayed near the tunnel entrance. "Hurry," he whispered. Daniel knelt beside the statue and placed the explosive device at its base. His hands moved quickly. He attached the fuse and checked it one last time. Then suddenly a sound echoed from the tunnel. Crunch, crunch, dot, crunch, dot. Daniel froze. Harold's eyes widened. "They're coming back," he whispered. Daniel lit the fuse. The spark flickered. The fuse began to burn slowly. "We have to go," Daniel shouted. They ran toward the tunnel, but halfway there, dark shapes suddenly appeared at the cave entrance. 3 creatures blocked the exit. Their tall gray bodies filled the tunnel. Their blank faces stared silently at the 2 men. Daniel stopped. They were trapped. Behind him, the fuse continued, burning toward the explosive. Harold's voice trembled. "What do we do?" Daniel looked around quickly. Then he saw another narrow passage on the side of the chamber. "Over there," he shouted. They ran toward the smaller tunnel. Behind them, the creatures moved forward, fast, much faster than before. Daniel pulled Harold through the narrow passage. The tunnel was tight and steep. Rocks scraped against their arms as they climbed. Behind them, the creatures followed. Their footsteps thundered through the cave. The fuse continued, burning closer. Closer. Daniel could see a faint light ahead. Another cave exit, almost there. He shouted. They pushed forward. Then suddenly, boom! The explosion shook the entire mountain. The ground trembled violently. Rocks crashed down from the ceiling. A deafening roar filled the tunnel. Daniel and Harold were thrown forward onto the ground as the cave behind them collapsed. Dust filled the air. For several seconds, neither of them could see anything. Then slowly, the shaking stopped. The forest outside was silent again. Daniel slowly stood up. Behind them, the entire cave entrance had collapsed. Under tons of rock, the statue was gone. The chamber was buried forever. Harold stared at the fallen rocks. Did it work? Daniel listened carefully. The forest was completely quiet. No footsteps, no creatures, no strange breathing sounds. Just the wind moving through the trees. "I think it's over," Daniel said quietly. 1 year later, the village of Black Hollow slowly returned to normal. No one disappeared anymore. The villagers began rebuilding their lives. Children played outside again. Lights stayed on at night for the first time in decades. The village slept peacefully. Daniel eventually left Black Hollow and returned to the city. His story about the village became famous, but many people believed it was just a legend. Just another horror story. Then one evening, Daniel received a package in the mail. There was no return address. Inside the package was a single photograph. Daniel frowned. It showed the forest near Black Hollow, the exact place where the cave once stood. But something in the background caught his attention. Daniel leaned closer to the photograph, and suddenly his blood turned cold. Standing between the trees, far in the distance, was a tall, gray figure, its face blank, watching the camera, watching him. Daniel slowly turned the photograph over. Written on the back were 4 simple words: "We are still here." Chapter 6. The Truth Buried Under the... For us, Daniel did not sleep that night. The images he saw in the forest kept repeating in his mind. The tall creature, the way it moved between the trees, and the moment it grabbed the villager and disappeared into the darkness. This was no ordinary disappearance. Someone or something was hunting the people of Black Hollow. Early the next morning, Daniel returned to the village square, but something felt different. The streets were empty, doors were locked, windows windows were covered with thick curtains as if the villagers were hiding from something. Even during the day, Daniel knocked on several doors. No one answered. Finally, the old woman who had warned him on his first day slowly opened her door. Her face looked even paler than before. "Why are you still here?" she whispered. Daniel stepped closer. "I saw it last night." The old woman's eyes widened. "You saw the forest spirit, didn't you?" Daniel shook his head. "That thing is not a spirit. It took a man, and you all know about it." The woman looked around nervously before pulling Daniel inside her small house. She finally spoke the words the villagers had been hiding for decades. 50 years ago, the village elders made a terrible mistake. She opened an old wooden box. Inside were yellowed photographs and ancient drawings. One picture showed a group of villagers standing in the forest around a strange stone altar. They performed a ritual, the woman said quietly. They believed the forest contained a powerful spirit that could protect the village. But the ritual awakened something else. Daniel studied the drawing. It showed a tall figure with long arms and hollow eyes standing between the trees. "What happened to it?" Daniel asked. The woman slowly looked up at him. "It was once a man." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. His name was Elias Carter. He volunteered to perform the ritual, but the ritual did not give him power. It turned him into something else. The woman's voice trembled. Something that must feed. Daniel suddenly realized something terrifying. Carter. That was the same last name as his own. But before he could ask anything more, a loud scream echoed. Outside, another person had disappeared, and night was still hours away. Something had changed. Chapter 7. The night of the HUNT. That night, Daniel refused to stay inside if he wanted the truth. He needed to return to the forest. But this time, he would not go alone. The old woman introduced him to the only person in the village who knew how to stop the creature. A former hunter named Marcus. Marcus had been tracking the monster for years. He believed the creature could only be destroyed if the original ritual site was destroyed. The altar is what binds the curse to the forest, Marcus explained. If we destroy it, the creature may finally die. At midnight, the two men entered the forest. The woods were darker than ever. Even the wind seemed afraid to move through the trees. They walked for nearly 30 minutes. Before Marcus stopped, were close, then they heard it. Branches snapping in the darkness. Something large was moving nearby. Daniel turned slowly, and there it was. The creature stepped out from behind the trees, up close. It looked even more horrifying. Its body was thin and unnaturally tall. Its arms stretched almost to the ground, but its face still looked partly human. Sunken eyes, pale skin, and a mouth twisted into something between pain and hunger. Marcus whispered, "Don't run." But the The creature had already seen them. It let out a low, distorted sound, and then it charged. Marcus fired his rifle. The bullet hit the creature in the chest, but it barely slowed down. Within seconds, the monster was right in front of them. Daniel grabbed a burning torch from their pack and swung it at the creature. The flames made it hesitate. Marcus shouted, "The altar! We must destroy the altar." They ran deeper into the forest until they finally reached a clearing dot. In the center stood the ancient stone altar from the photographs, covered in strange carvings. Dark stains surrounded its base. Marcus threw a container of gasoline over the stone, lighted. Daniel hesitated for only a second before dropping the torch. Flames exploded around the altar. The creature screamed, a terrible sound that echoed across the entire forest for the first time in 50 years. The curse was breaking, but the creature was not finished. Chapter 8. The final REV. Elatio on the burning altar collapsed in a shower of sparks. The creature staggered toward the flames, screaming in agony. Its body began to change. The long limbs shrank. The twisted spine straightened slowly. The monster began to look human again. Marcus lowered his weapon. "It's working." The creature fell to the ground. For a moment, it looked like an exhausted old man. Its eyes slowly opened, and it looked directly at Daniel. "Carter," the creature whispered. Daniel froze. "How do you know my name?" The man smiled weakly. "Because you are my blood." Daniel's heart stopped. "My blood?" The man nodded. "I am Elias Carter, your great-grandfather." Daniel felt the world spinning around him. The old ritual. The curse. It had been in his family all along. Elias spoke one final warning. The curse never dies. It only chooses another host. Suddenly, Elias grabbed Daniel's arm. A dark mark spread across Daniel's skin like burning ink. Marcus tried to pull him away, but it was too late. The mark disappeared into Daniel's veins. Elias Carter took one final breath, and then he was gone. The forest became silent. Marcus stared at Daniel in horror. "What did he do to you?" Ending verse. CO Antios. 2 days later, Daniel left Black Hollow. The disappearances stopped. The villagers believed the nightmare was finally over. Daniel published his article, "The Curse of Black Hollow." It became the most famous story of his career. But Daniel kept one secret. He never told anyone about the mark, because at first it disappeared. Months passed. Nothing happened until one night Daniel woke up in the middle of the night. His apartment window was open. Cold wind moved through the room, and from the mirror across the room, he saw something that made his blood freeze. His reflection looked taller, thinner, and his eyes were no longer human. Outside, somewhere in the darkness of the city, a scream echoed through the night, and for the first time in 50 years, something new had begun hunting again. The end. outro. Thank you for WATCHNG, and that is the end of the story. If you enjoyed tonight's mysterious tale, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support Bang Official. Your support helps us continue bringing more dark mysteries, horror legends, and strange stories from around the world. Also, tell us in the comments, do you think the curse of Black Hollow is truly over? Or is Daniel only the beginning of something even more terrifying? Thank you so much for listening until the end. Turn off the lights, stay safe tonight, and we will see you again in the next mysterious story. Good night.